It's HeroScape expansion time again. We're going back to 2005. We're going to review the Utgar's Rage expansion wave, which was wave 2 for classic HeroScape. And we're also going to review the Orm's Return. Don't know who Orm is. Large model expansion. So let's start with the heroes this time. 2005. The first set within Utgar's Rage was Heroes of Baron's Spur. This was a 4-hero set. I was surprised it was only 4. I thought it could have been 5. First hero of Baron's Spur was Krug, known to others as Krug. Krug was the troll. Krug's a famous unit. It's also a very heavy model, surprisingly. Makes you wonder what kind of plastic. Like, this guy probably wasn't at all hollow inside. He's heavy. I could go dig him out, but I got 2 90-gallon bins of HeroScape stuff. Anyway, Krug has 2 things going for him. First of all, he's got a double attack where the more damage he has on him, the more damage he does. So that's a lot of damage. That's 2 attacks of 9 if you pump him up all the way. He also has beast spawning, which means he can actually bond with the arrow gruts, which we mentioned in the Wave 1 expansion video, tagged on screen. So while you're setting up the arrow gruts and putting them in position up on height somewhere, you can be sending Krug up the middle with his 8 health, just doing absurd amounts of damage. Krug is an A-tier unit. He's one of the best meat shields in the game, especially when you're playing multiplayer. A meat shield is important. If you're playing with more than just 2 players in HeroScape, you're playing with 2 or 3 or 4, especially on homemade maps, you kind of have a no man's land to start off with. You gotta go run across to actually start making damage. It's where range can be very valuable. Or what can be even more valuable is if you had someone that can run across, can run out of the bunker and go make it to the enemy before they get shot down all the way. If they can do that, they're going to engage the other enemies and the other ranged characters, and things are going to start going in your direction. Krug is absolutely a meat shield unit. Also, believe it or not, it's some people's last name, which is kind of cool. I've known different Krugs throughout my life. 3 at least. 2 different Krugs not related to each other, and then Krug the HeroScape troll. Next hero, Me-Burq-Sa. Me-Burq-Sa I have already covered in my HeroScape points changes video. Me-Burq-Sa was an A-tier unit and was still an A-tier unit, despite having official points raised for Me-Burq-Sa from 50 to 70. If you want to see the full breakdown of Me-Burq-Sa, check that video out. My favorite way to use Me-Burq-Sa is bonding with the Swog Riders, but we got a lot of units to get through, so let's keep going. Next we have Sir Denrick. Sir Denrick, not Sir Dendrick. Some people will throw that unnecessary consonant in there. Sir Denrick has a few things that he does. First of all, he's a giant killer. So he's got 4 attack normally and gets +2 attack when attacking huge characters, which is meant to resemble slaying dragons, which is pretty cool. With 5 life, 4 defense, and an ability that allows them to do double disengagement damage, you don't want to engage Sir Denrick. But here's where Sir Denrick really comes into play. Sir Denrick bonds with the Knights of Weston. You could also bond with the Me-Burq Warriors or with the Frostclaw Paladins from Age of Annihilation. Sir Denrick is part of the best bonding option set in all of classic HeroScape. The Jandar human champion bonding. Sir Denrick and the Knights are a little slow, what with Sir Denrick having 5 movement and the Knights having 4 movement. They're beefy. They got 4 defense. Sir Denrick having 4 attack and the Knights having 3 attack. And there's so many synergy opportunities. Sir Denrick, he's an A-tier. Not quite in the S-tier, and honestly, the speed is partially why. Another health point or 2 away from being an S-tier unit. Sir Denrick, one of the Sirs in HeroScape. There are actually a handful of Knights in classic HeroScape. It's interesting, I think when the new HeroScape, they decided to do away with historical units, but with the Frostclaw Paladins, which are kind of Knights, they have Knights still. They're just polar bears. The last hero of Heroes of Baron's Spur was Khosumet the Darklord. Lord Khosumet has returned. Who's a wolf, which is kind of a cool theming going on. I don't know why Khosumet's standing, back to the camera like that. It's been a bit of an odd pose. Khosumet the Darklord is a wolf, and it is 2 things. First of all, he works well with the Anubian Wolves, which we're going to talk about later in the video, where he helps them get more attack. The Anubian Wolves, you'll see, have a 20-sided die roll each turn that says how many attack dice they use. And Khosumet helps them do that, and also makes it impossible for the Anubian Wolves to roll 1, which causes one of your Anubian Wolves to just explode. So that doesn't happen. Khosumet the Darklord also bonds with the Wolves of Badru, which came out later. They were not available at the time of release here, but they allowed you to move the Wolves of Badru with Khosumet. So those are 2 really cool abilities. Khosumet's kind of a pedestrian character stats-wise. But the problem with Khosumet is those 2 don't work together. You see, if you have the Anubian Wolves and you want to get the Khosumet bonus when you're rolling for their Relentless Fury, you don't want to risk losing Khosumet because you don't need him to bond with them to do that. So what you do is you leave Khosumet in the back line while you run up with your Anubian Wolves. Remember, in HeroScape, you don't move your whole army every turn like you do in some games like Warhammer. Now, that's fine, but that means that you're probably using Khosumet at the end of the game. You might think that that could work out well. He has a role in the beginning of the game and a role at the end of the game. But the problem is, the Wolves of Badru aren't really one of those closer units because at the end of a game, you really need to have more range and often more defense to be able to survive. That combined with his point cost, Khosumet's in the C tier. It's too bad. It's just a little bit overpriced for what it is. The Wolves are cool. Actually, I remember too, the Anubian Wolves are one of the first units I think I grabbed when I played HeroScape for the first time. The second pack in Wave 2 was Minutemen and Wolves. First with the Anubian Wolves. So the Anubian Wolves, they appear to have a very lean attack number of only 1. But with Unleashed Fury, what you do is you roll a 20-sided die. And depending on what you roll more attack dice. With a roll of 20, you actually add 8 attack dice for each wolf. And that's before you add height and everything. So these wolves can be nuts. If you roll a 1, one of them, like I said, explodes. You get +1 to that roll if you have Khosumet in your army. So the math works out. Per full squad of Anubian Wolves, you're rolling 3 attacks of about 3.6 or so dice without Khosumet and 3.9, almost 4 with Khosumet. Per squad, if you count the 1 exploding, you're going from something like 10.3 dice to 11.9 dice or so. It's something, I did the math over there, but that computer screen is far away. The Anubian Wolves, like Khosumet, are a C tier. Fun in theory, less fun in practice. So many units like the Anubian Wolves also seem to have bonding. Without getting actual bonding in, they actually end up being kind of expensive at 75 points each. So they're in the C tier. And the next unit is the 4th Mass Line. This unit I also already covered in the points changes. 4th Mass Line at the original points total of 70 was an S tier unit. But even at the new official points total of 100 points, they're still in the A tier because they have the Wait Then Fire ability, which with the way HeroScape plays, if you don't move in a turn and then shoot, they get an extra attack die. And plus they have the Disciplined Army bonus. They're really good. Much better than you would think Minutemen would be. Originally S tier, still A tier. The 3rd pack was Drones and Minions. Drones and Minions would have had much different connotations if this pack were released in 2025 as opposed to 2005. I'm pretty sure we were still calling them remote control helicopters, and I don't think Despicable Me was out yet. The fact that that's even a question, though, really is making me feel old. Let's talk about the minions of Utgar first. So these guys were Taylord's buddies. So they have actually bonding with Kyrie that follow Utgar. Kyrie heroes that follow Utgar. The minions of Utgar are nice and big, and they got 6 defense. For every skull they roll, it counts as 2. And that's especially good when they're with Taylord. In fact, if Taylord seemed overpowered and really like a dumb unit at 180 points when Wave 1 came out, with Wave 2, say, oh, you're just supposed to use it with these guys. Brought him from a D tier to a C tier. The problem with the minions of Utgar is they're really slow. It's a big wave. They can fly, which helps. They can fly over walls and stuff, but they're slow. That's not to say I haven't seen them used before. They're kind of scary, seeing a mass of these basically bats, beefy bats descending on you. The minions of Utgar are a B tier. If you play with a 400 point limit in HeroScape, you can do 2 squads of minions of Utgar and Taylord, and that's your 400 points. It's kind of underwhelming for 400 points, given also that in classic HeroScape, at this point, you didn't have Major Q9 yet, but eventually you'll be able to roll out Major Q9 and a big dragon like Charos. Now, that's not necessarily a good army, but that's still just giving an idea of how much these guys cost. Man, 6 of them is 220 points. That's a lot. So the minions of Utgar are in the B tier. Scary enough that they're not C tier, but still too slow and expensive to be A tier. Because that's what it means to be B tier, because you're better than C tier and not yet in the A tier. The drones of this set were not a Vidar cybernetic futuristic unit. These drones were more like ant drones. They're the Marro Drones. They also come from a hive. So the Marro Drones, the only squad in all of classic HeroScape that you can move more than 1 squad at a time. One of the things with HeroScape is that the fact that you can only move 1 squad at a time makes it feel like you never really have this big army moving down the board. You have to be very tactical with your movements. Usually you have everyone hanging out in a crowd, and then you send off like a few squads at once. Sometimes just one at a time, and just say, all right, you go. All right, you go. Because you're only activating one unit per turn. The Marro Drones were a huge relief in that regard, because some turns you could actually move 9 drones at once and actually feel like you had, you know, the massive army. And if you had the Marrow Hive, which came out in the 2007 Swarm of the Marrow Master set, you can actually regenerate them. So you could get like a real nice, like, you know, bone-tied kind of an army going here. They'd be the core of that. But they don't do anything else besides that, really. They're not especially strong. They're really just meant to be, it's a lot of them. They're a B tier. At 50 points, you could get a lot of them going, but annoyingly, because the Marrow Hive is 160, it costs 410 points to get a Marrow Hive and then 3 squads of drones. Now, realistically, you're not doing the Marrow Hive at a 40 point, you're definitely not doing a 40 point game. You're not doing the Marrow Hive at a 400 point game. For 50 points each, they're still, you know, if they're 40 points, they might be S tier, because that adds up. This is one of those units where you didn't want just 3 of them. You actually wanted to have maybe 4 squads in your army, maybe even 5 if you're, you know, your local house rules allowed for that. But the Marrow Drones, mainly because of how, like, believing it is to be able to move a lot of units at once, they're a B tier. The last of the small packs was Knights and the Swog Rider.
Drop the.
We'll get to the Swog Rider second. We're going to talk about the Knights first. I talked already about Sir Denrick. Well, these are Sir Denrick's fanboys, the Knights of Weston. The Knights of Weston were part of that amazing bonding cadre, like the Me-Burq Warriors, which now the Frostclaw Paladins also partake in. You could bond the Knights of Weston with Sir Denrick. You can bond them with Sir Gilbert, who helps the movement challenges of all the Knights. Sir Gilbert, we'll get to him in a later way, but he was also in the points change video that I did. So Sir Gilbert's a really good guy to have with the Knights of Weston as well. You also have Sir Hawthorne, who's one of the promos we'll get to. You had Alistair Me-Burq, although he was really meant for the Me-Burq Warriors. But you also had all of the Viking champions. So that would be Thorgrim and Finn, the Viking champions from the Master set. You also had Eldgrim, the Viking champion, who came out later. The Knights of Weston also had that double damage from disengage ability that Sir Denrick had. And they're strong. 3 attack, 4 defense, 70 points for a squad of 4. The Knights of Weston are S tier. Although not to be confused with Weston Hotels. They are not from there. You know, they are much hardier than ones that would be from there. Also cool sculpts. You end up getting a bit of a Silver Tide kind of a look to the board when you get a lot of these guys. Because again, they came 4 in a pack. 3 squads, you're already at 12. That's a lot of Knights. And now the Swog Rider, which despite the naming of the expansion pack, is not a unique hero. The Swog Rider is a common hero. The Swog Rider is your bonding target with your Arrowgruts. You might use Krug as bonding early in the game, but you really need the Swog Rider to give the Arrowgruts a range bonus. What? With a movement of 8, the Swog Rider could get wherever you needed very quickly and would give all the Arrowgruts touching the Swog Rider an attack and a defense, a bonus attack and bonus defense. And then if you have multiple Swog Riders, because they're common heroes, and let's be real, you're probably buying a lot of Knights of Weston and Swog Riders here, those bonuses stack. Add that with height, and your Arrowgruts are just bombing arrows at sometimes as much as like 4 attack each. So for only 25 points for a Swog Rider, you're also looking at Swog Riders as an army fill-in. If you just needed something, like let's say you're playing a 600 point game, you're at 575 points, you just need something to throw in there. A Swog Rider is not the worst option, depending on the map. It's also a fast unit that can just run around. Pretty sure Swog Riders are based on Ward Riders from Lord of the Rings. Swog Rider is an A tier. It's not that strong by itself, and that, to be fair, that is kind of a lot that you need going on, having multiple Swog Riders up with your Arrowgruts, but it's not that hard of an army to pull. I've pulled that off before, getting pumped up Arrowgruts with your Swog Riders. So yeah, the Swog Riders, they're A tier. And now the large hero pack. It came out around the same time in 2005. This is Orm's Return, the Heroes of Lour. For some reason, they had a different name for this expansion wave, Orm's Return, as the pack, the Heroes of Lour, even though it's just the only expansion pack in that wave was the Heroes of Lour. So this is Orm's Return, Heroes of Lour. Heroes of Lour. The first hero here is Brunak. Brunak is not a troll, he's a Troll-to-core, whatever that is. Brunak, first of all, can carry other units. This is something that is really underrated, in my opinion, in the HeroScape community. Mainly because it's not that useful for 2-player play, or like where you're just carrying your own units. If you were playing 2 versus 2, and you carry one of your friend's units, and then on the very next turn, they shoot with them, or they run and shoot with them actually. That's really useful tactically. Brunak also is a solid enough unit that maybe not a meat shield, but can survive a little bit. With 7 defense, 3 health, not bad. Brunak's other ability is the Bloodthirsty special attack, where for an attack of 4, if he destroys a figure, can attack again. Now, sometimes you're deciding between using your normal attack, which from height is going to be 5, versus the Bloodthirsty special attack, which is 4. For 110 points, Brunak's a B tier. I'm actually seeing a lot of people put Brunak as one of the worst heroes. They're trying to do this by just like mathing together attack and points and things like that. I can see Brunak coming down lower because it's very hard to quantify the benefit of the carry ability. Brunak's a B tier for me.
Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
Next up is Deathwalker 8000. Deathwalker 8000, the older version of Deathwalker 9000, even though 9000 came out first, they decided, I guess, to go with 8000 because Deathwalker 10,000 would have been a lot of zeros to put in the card, I guess. I can understand going to 8000. Deathwalker 8000 is the rapid fire of the Deathwalkers. Even though he has a cannon, he's actually the rapid fire one. And the one that came in the core set, even though it has the rapid fire looking gun, is the explosion attack. So Deathwalker 8000 for 130 points gets you a rapid fire special attack. As long as you keep inflicting wounds, you get to keep attacking. So actually a more usable version of Brunak's Bloodthirsty special attack. But that's it. And remember, Deathwalker 8000, like the Deathwalkers, like the Soulborgs, you only have 1 life. So it's a unit that is going to be beefy in some games, might last a very long time, but because you only roll 2 shields out of the 6 sides of the defense dice, actually does get taken out kind of quickly most of the time. For 130 points, not as good as Deathwalker 9000 for 140, but Deathwalker 9000 also gives a bonus to the Zedian guards. You know, my A rating for Deathwalker 9000 was kind of controversial in my Master Set video. To be fair, I did have him as a low A tier. Deathwalker 8000 is all the way down to C tier though. You don't get as much of a point savings as you would hope. The rapid fire attack doesn't feel like it works as often as the explosion attack. Plus, it's just a little bit less, you know, that one less defense die, you never know when that's going to make a difference. So Deathwalker 8000 is in the C tier. Now we have Charos, the first 200 plus point unit in the history of HeroScape. Charos was a big green dragon, and if you kept collecting all the way through the Dungeons and Dragons waves, a very good candidate for your Lizard King that you can declare from the Greenscale Warriors, although that's less of an impact here, especially because it's impossible to get Greenscale Warriors now for a reasonable cost. In fact, the Dungeons and Dragons waves were really tough to get multiples of the commons of. I have at least one of all of them, but a lot of the common squads only have 1 squad, so it's a little bit... it's unfortunate. Charos is the definition of meat shield. Big, can fly, 9 life, 5 defense, plus counter strike. When Charos is being attacked, if you roll more shields than your attacker rolls skulls, you do damage back to the attacker, which is Charos is so big. You got a lot of chances to roll that counter strike. And you're also, because Charos is so much life, you're not super concerned with disengaging or anything like that. Although most likely what you're doing with Charos is you're just flying right into the heart of the enemy and just locking a bunch of other characters up. For 210 points though, the fact that it's only a melee attacker, the fact that she's only a melee attacker, the fact that Charos is only a melee attacker, still just in the B tier. Close to being A tier. I like Charos a lot. Definitely not the strongest of the dragons though, or at least not the most deadly of the dragons. You know, like in the ballpark of Mimring from the core set. If I'm remembering correctly. Yep, no, that was it. Second dragon. You had 2 dragons at this point in the game's history. You had Mimring and you had Charos. Fun fact, for maybe a decade, my main fantasy basketball team's name was Charos Delfino. So that's a super inside reference to people who remember Carlos Delfino. Next, we have Su-Bak-Na, who looks like a dragon, but I'm pretty sure Su-Bak-Na refers to... Su-Bak-Na might be the little guy riding on top of... Su-Bak-Na, which one is... I feel like I asked this before and people answered me in the comments, but I didn't internalize it because I'm a dad and I don't remember new things. I'll have to look this up. Maybe I'll pop that one as a fun fact. Su-Bak-Na is the Marrow kind of a dragon rider dragon thing. It does a lot of attack. 7 attack, which is, that's a lot. You can kill a lot of things with that. Su-Bak-Na is kind of a glass cannon though. Well, not really a cannon, more like a glass boxing glove? Glass Wolverine claw. 7 attack, only 3 defense, only 5 life. So kind of like Mimring is unfortunately kind of easy to take out. But with Hive Supremacy, Su-Bak-Na helps any of the 20-sided die rolls with basically any unit in the Marrow army, which is a lot of units. Just in this video, you have Me-Burq-Sa's paralyzing stare gets buffed. The Marro Drones, when you roll to see how many you get to move, they get buffed. 11 different Marro units got buffed by Su-Bak-Na's Hive Supremacy. So what are you going to do with Su-Bak-Na? You're going to have this cool looking dragon thing. You're going to hold him back. And at the end of the game, he's going to fly around and try to scoop up, you know, the riffraff that's left at the end of the game. Your opponents might have like a Swog Rider running around. You got to chase down that Swog Rider. But like a leftover Khosumet the Darklord, yeah, take him out. But because of the lower life of only 5 life, Su-Bak-Na is still just an A tier. It's also kind of a target, like especially because he's damageable. Like if you had to choose between directing your long-range firepower at either Su-Bak-Na or Charos, you're going to direct it at Su-Bak-Na because it's much more likely to actually make a difference. Because remember, Charos, 5 defense, 9 life, can take 8 damage, and is still just Charos, still is like a pretty strong attacker. Su-Bak-Na is long gone by that point. Plus, Su-Bak-Na does more damage. So, again, Su-Bak-Na is a target. Maybe the target when you're attacking from range. Up there with, like, Grimnak, of, like, the biggest targets you want to take out from range if you can. So, Su-Bak-Na is an A tier. We'll finish 2005 off in the next video because there was another expansion wave. But the last unit for Orm's Return is Dund. Dund?
Dund.
From the little double dot.
Like, you as in flute.
Dund, it was, I think, the only Vidar card of this expansion. Dund is a 110-point big dog with paralyzing stare. Before moving and after attacking, you can roll a 20-sided die, and if you get a 15, you remove all order markers from the unit that you just stared at. So that's good. Problem is you have to do it before moving. See, if Dund could do Crippling Gaze, which is what his ability is called, after moving and before attacking, with a move of 6, Dune could effectively go 11 spots out, and, you know, look at the range. We're talking about, like, 22 spots, like, from one side to another, where you could, the area of potential influence here. You'd have to watch out for Dune. But because Dune has to do it before moving, the range is 5, and your opponent has a much easier time than not getting close to Dune. You know, just like keep out, you know, Dune behind the fence. So it's kind of easy to avoid. 4 life, 5 defense, a little bit beefy with only 3 attack though. Not gonna be doing much attack, really all about getting that crippling gaze going. It's not strong enough to get into the depths of your enemy, you know, territory there. But he is a good boy. Who's a good boy? Yes, you are, he's a good boy. What is it, Dune? What is it? Dune is in the D tier. But to make it better, we're going to name the D tier after Dune. So from now on, the D tier, at least for HeroScape videos, is the Dune tier. Other games, tier lists, don't have any idea what I'm talking about with the Dune tier. And with that, we are doomed with this video. More HeroScape tier lists are to come, including more tier lists on the new Age of Annihilation sets. If you want to see those, remember to subscribe to Jackson's Warfield. I'll see you in the next video.
Hehehehe